Hi everybody, I'm all glad you decided to join the Tamburitza class starting September 24th on Monday nights at 7 p.m. Okay, I'm Edo Sindicich, and this is going to be called pre-lesson number 1. What I want you to do is just memorize this before you come to your first practice, and it'll make life a lot easier. In music, there's only 7 notes. Just like the alphabet, we start with the letter A, but in music there's only 7 notes, so we only go up to the letter G, and then it starts over again. So it's A, B, C, D, E, F, G. The next note would be A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And the difference is some notes are lower, and the higher you go, every time it recycles, the notes get higher in sound. Just like my voice is lower, a woman's voice is higher, a little kid's voice is higher. Those are different notes, and they get higher and higher and higher. It just recycles. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Well, you don't need to know all that right now. I'm doing something real simple here. What you do need to know to play music is some notes are next to each other and some are a little farther apart. Now, just like when you say do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, those notes are actually not next to each other. There's a distance between some of the notes, and some of the notes are next to each other. So, on my tamburitza instrument, what you will be learning, all I want you to do is practice this in your head. You don't have to play anything. Just like when you look at a row of houses. Let's just say we're standing on a block and we're looking at 7 houses, and they were named A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Some of the houses are closer together, and some have a distance between them. Well, in music, the distance is called 1 step, and when they're next to each other, it's called a half a step. So imagine you're walking down the block, and from A to B, you walk 1 step to your next door neighbor's house. Now B is touching C, so that's called a half step. C is 1 step to D. The next house, D to E, is 1 step. E and F are always next door neighbors. That's called a half step. And then F to G is 1 step. And then if we start it over again, to get back to the next cycle of A, it's 1 step. So, this is all I want you to learn. A to B, B's next to C. C to D, D to E, E is next to F, F to G, and we're going to start over again, so I'll say G to A. So, while you're sitting around at home, I want you to say A to B, B is next to C, D, E is next to F, G, A. If I don't say next to it, that means there's 1 step between them. That means only B and C are next to each other, and E and F. I'll do it again. A, B next to C, D, E next to F, G, A. We're starting over again. A, B is next to C, next door neighbors. D, E is next to F, G, A. So when you're in the car, we're going A, B next to C, D, E next to F, G, A. That's all I want you to say to yourself. A, B next to C, D, E next to F, G, A. And I always put the A in there because so you know that there is a distance between G and the new cycle of notes. All right, now if I was looking at my instrument, just so maybe this will help you a little bit. If this was A, and it is, the distance in music is 1 fret. So when I say A, B, see I skip a fret. B next to C, there's no distance. C to D, it's 1, there's, you know, they're not next to each other, so there's 1 fret you skip. D to E, they're not next to each other, but E and F are. Then if I kept going, there's F to G, I skip a fret. And if I started over, way down there would be A, and I skip a fret. So, if I was saying my saying, I would be going A, B next to C, D, I skipped a fret. From D to E, there's 1 step. E is next to F, they're always next to each other. F to G, G to A. So only between B and C and E and F do we not skip a fret? So once you learn this cycle, all I have to do is tell you the string names, and wherever we start on the alphabet, it would follow. So my first string is on your instrument is called, well, actually it goes G, D, A, E. So the E is the last string right here. So it doesn't matter where we start in this A, B, C, D, E, F, G, we just follow the pattern. So if I knew the first string name is E, I can just go through what that little exercise I gave you. So E is next to F, so the first fret is F. F to G, I skip a fret. G to A to B. B and C are next door neighbors, so the next note is C. C to D, D to E, and E is next to F. And if I kept on going, F to G. So I just want to show you this in reality on your instrument, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If you know that B and C are next to each other and E and F, then I can start you anywhere on your instrument and you can go right up the scale. And by distance in music, what it comes out to on a tamburitza is 1 fret. So B and C are always going to be next to each other, and E and F are next to each other, and every other one, all the rest of the notes, you skip 1 fret. So if I went up the whole instrument, I'll start on another string. This string is called D. You don't need to know this, but I'll just tell you this. D. D and E, they're not next to each other, so I skip a fret. So I'm on E. E to F, they are next to each other. F to G, they are not, so I skip a fret. G to A, we're starting the cycle over again because it goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So G to A, they're not next to each other, I skip a fret. A to B, they're not next to each other, so I skip a fret. B and C are always next door neighbors, so it's the next fret. C to D, they are not next door neighbors, it's 1 step. D to E, they are not next door neighbors, so I skip a fret. Now E to F are always next door neighbors, so it's the next fret. So no matter what string I give you to start on, you can go up your whole instrument once you learn this pattern. So it's A, B next to C, D, E next to F, G, A. And remember, there's only 7 notes, but when you start to cycle over, the distance between G and A is 1 fret or 1 step. So we call it a step in music. That's the distance, as opposed to like a mile or a foot or whatever. In music, it's called a step. So every time you skip a distance, it's called a step. And the distance just so happens to equal the size, the space of 1 fret. Just like on a guitar, you have frets, so if you skip a fret, you're going to a different note. So what I want you to learn here is just that B and C are next to each other and E and F are next to each other. And then when you come into practice and I teach you your instrument, you'll know that it goes A, B next to C, D, E next to F, G, A. And remember, the reason I went from G to A is because you're starting the next cycle of notes. Alright, that's all I want you to learn. A, B next to C, D, E next to F, G, A. I went a little too far about explanations, but if you just remember the distance between houses, and you imagine a row of houses, and there's 7 of them, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and just remember if you were walking from A to B, it takes 1 step. B and C are touching each other. Then you would take 1 step from C to D. And then I'm at D's house, I go to E, it takes 1 step. E and F, the houses are touching each other, so it's called a half a step. If I walk from F to G, it's 1 step. And then I want to start the cycle over again on the next block. Let's say A, B, C, D, F, G. It takes 1 step to go from G to A. So it's simple here. It's either 1 step or a half step. If they touch each other, it's a half step. If they don't touch each other, it's 1 step. On your instrument, a step is skip a fret. So if they touch each other, you just go to the next fret. So if you remember this when you walk in and I'll give you your instruments, And I go, okay, repeat the scale for me. A, B next to C, D, E next to F, G, and then start over again, A, G, A. So if I showed you a note, or I told you your string name, you could start at whatever letter you start on it, apply this pattern, and then you'll know all your notes on your strings. That's how easy it is. So there's only 4 strings, so whatever note the string is, if I told you this string was A, which it is, so we're starting on the scale. So if I hit the string, it's A. So A to B is 1 step, which means skip a fret. So that second fret is B. B is next to C, so the next fret is C. D, it's always 1 step. They're not next to each other. D to E, it's 1 step. They're not touching each other. But E and F are always touching each other. So it's the next fret. F to G, they are not touching each other. It's 1 step. G to A, I'm starting to cycle over again. They do not touch each other. And then I can keep going up the instrument all the way. So if you know this pattern, you only have 4 strings. Once you know this pattern, you'll know all the notes on your instrument real quick. A, B next to C, D, E next to F, G, A. Alright, that's it. I hope I didn't confuse you too much. This is called pre-lesson number 1. Thanks. See you in 5 weeks.